Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Play Choices podcast, a podcast you hear. I'm your host, V. This episode is going to be a little bit unusual from our normal format. So, we usually try to keep episodes very specific to one chapter of a book. And I think the benefit of having a platform like a podcast is that we don't have to stick to one format and we can produce different types of episodes. So this episode is going to be the first installment of a format we're going to title Choices Chat. It is a format where we'll be tackling one topic and we aren't going to be sticking to one book or one chapter in order to fully flesh out the discussion. So with that being said, this episode will not be spoiler safe for really any book. We probably aren't going to go into the plot of any particular book in a lot of depth, but we may bring up plot points or character details in order to support our conversation, our thoughts, etc. And therefore no book will be safe from spoiler alerts. So if that makes you uncomfortable, feel free to join us for another episode where the format is a little bit more structured and focused. Now that I'm done with my monologue, Lucas, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Lucas. I'm the co-host.
And then Cath.
Hi, I'm Cath. I'm the guest. I may or may not be a sentient squirrel.
Yes. So this episode is also there's a lot of firsts. This is our first not chapter focused episode, and it's also the first episode where we have a guest host. So there's a lot of firsts that are really being accomplished in this episode. Probably all the listeners know who Lucas and I are. I would love if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, Cath, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
I've been playing Choices on and off since I was 17. I actually identified as a lesbian when I first started playing. I currently identify as bisexual, so I've always been like at the queer end of it. Mm. And I'm actually pretty well versed with Tumblr, regardless of like what fandom it is. So the Tumblr fandom is what I'm most familiar with. I love podcasts and just in-depth discussion about anything. And, you know, when I saw there was a Choices podcast, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And so, yeah, I reached out to you, and it's a massive honor to be on this podcast.
Oh my God. That's so
oh my
sweet.
God, it's a massive honor to have you on the podcast.
No, truly.
I feel like I say this like literally every single time anyone like interacts with our content whatsoever, but like it's still amazing to me that we sit here and record our voices and our thoughts for like 2 hours and like people actually like tune in. Like that's it's a very strange concept that there are people on the other side listening. And like the fact that there's like anyone who wants to join us and talk to us, like, oh my God, bless you for listening to us for like multiple hours and still thinking this is a good group to stay with and a good group to have a chat with.
Well, the parasocial relationship has become a sort of reality.
Also, I feel like we should introduce that you are like what, a psychology and what else major?
Psych and brain sciences major.
Oof.
Yeah, see, there's gonna be a lot of shit that you say that we're just gonna laugh and be like, uh-huh, and I'm not gonna understand a word of like what it means.
Don't worry, I'm not like deep into the major. I'm just like halfway through like pre-major states. So I'm a common pleb just like you.
Oh, it doesn't sound like it at all. It doesn't come off that way. So first, I know you said that it seems like you've been playing Choices for a while. So how long have you been on the app?
So because it's like a giant app and my phone is stupid, I've had to uninstall it at some points because I was just too busy. But I remember I started playing in 2018 because I had friends on this Haley Kiyoko Amino, like if you remember Amino, like yeah. I'm so sorry. And one of them kind of recommended Choices and was kind of talking about playing The Royal Romance. And I was like, oh, it's probably one of those straight people things. She's like, actually, they have a female love interest. And I was like, oh, worm? And yeah, that's what got me into Choices. And I've been on and off in the fandom depending on how busy like my life has been. Sometimes college was just like a lot and I wasn't playing, but I'm familiar with most of the books on the app.
Yeah, it's fair. I've definitely taken breaks, whether it was just because I was too busy, I forgot about it, lack of content that I was interested in. I think we've all been there at some point. I think it was in like 2020. There was a couple of months where I think it was actually right around when they released like Rising Tides or something, which is when I was like checked out because it was only Rising Tides and another book that they were releasing. And I was like, I think it's because they were releasing it like the summer of like 2020, and it was like already such a depressing time, and I was like, I don't want to play a book that like talks explicitly about like global warming because it's just going to it's just going to make me sad. Like
Oh, I have so many thoughts about that. We could
there's a
put them
lot
off
of
till later unless you want to get into it
right.
now.
I honestly I don't like have an opinion on that book beyond it probably wasn't the right time for me to be playing it personally. I am curious to hear like because you said that you're kind of from our conversations you're kind of a lurker on the fandom. So I guess I'm wondering at what point did the book start to interest you enough that you were like, let me see if there's anyone else on the internet that's talking about these.
Well, like I don't know at what point I was like, oh, let's see what Tumblr has to say about this stuff. But like I think like 2018 over the summer, I remember the Tumblr fandom freaking out over like the Bloodbound finale. So I remember it must have been before then, but I don't really remember when I was just like, oh hey, let me just cruise and see what's going on this social media.
Gotcha.
But I kind of got familiar with how the Tumblr fandom behaves.
Is that how you heard about the podcast on Tumblr?
Yeah, I saw you talking about like how there had been like stuff and it came back and I was like, oh, let me check this out.
I think it's probably fair to say that we had like a mini interview process before we decided to like get on a call with you to record.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm wondering from like your perspective,
Yes.
like what that was like. Because I have had a few people reach out to me about like guest hosting. Someone like explicitly asked me like, am I looking for guest host right now? And my answer is I am not looking, but I'm not opposed. I mean, clearly we have a guest host on right now, so it would be completely false and like hypocritical for me to be like, I don't want a guest host on here. I think it's just more so it's like I already have one person and our normal episodes with just Lucas and I are like sometimes I mean we just recorded an episode on the nanny affair that's going to go up before this one goes up. But I mean I'm working through the audio right now and it's like 2.5 hours because we were just talking so much.
Yeah.
And so trying to imagine adding another person and like of course if another person is joining us, I want to give them the time and the space to be able to express their opinions, to engage in conversation. That would probably increase it to like 3 hours or like 3.5. And that's just so much content. And I think also what I'm looking for in a guest host is someone who I feel like can bring a unique perspective. I don't want someone who's just going to like agree with us all of the time or someone who like isn't going to challenge us to see things differently. And of course, there's also like a personality fit. And trying to find all of those three things in like one person is challenging. And my fear with opening up the Pandora's box of like, yeah, let's have guest hosts is like, I don't want anyone to feel offended if I'm coming to the conclusion that maybe this one particular person may not be the best fit for the two of us, right? Because Lucas and I are two very specific personalities.
Yeah.
It may be difficult for just anyone to jump into a conversation with us and not have it be awkward. So when you had jumped into my email, I was like, I really like this person. They seem very intelligent. They seem very informed. They seem very genuine and interested. But I guess I'm just curious from like your perspective, like how that process went.
I felt so socially awkward, like reaching out. I'm not even gonna lie. I was like, oh my god, how do I not sound like a stalker?
No.
You did not sound like a stalker. You did not. I can at least guarantee that.
I was just like, okay, how do I word this in the best way possible? I didn't want to be like, oh, I'm just such a fangirl, but it's like, I just wanted to say, like, hey, I support, like, this podcast. That was, like, my first and foremost, like, intention to say, hey, I support this podcast. But if you're looking, I'd be interested, but, like, that's not important, you know?
No, I think it was. I have to go back and look at our emails, but there was something that you said. I think it was particularly because you brought up the fact that like you have identified as queer as playing as you know like the Choices app. Lucas, gay, me. I don't really like to put a label on my sexuality. It's not something that I find helpful for my identity, but largely heteronormative for me, right? And so I think it was more so I was like, oh, this is a person who, you know, I try to be balanced. I try not to favor the male allies, even though, you know, male allies is who Lucas is attracted to, and primarily who I choose too. But I didn't want. I guess I just appreciated having someone come on here who was going to inherently come at the content in the books in a different perspective than the way that Lucas and I were going to play, right? And not to imply that like you
Right.
always have to pick a female ally, but I think it's just like you are automatically going to think a little bit differently about the content than I would or than Lucas would. So I think that's what made me like want to respond back to you, not to mention I like loved the content of your email. I thought it was like the perfect balance of I'm interested and confident that I could bring a different perspective, but also not demanding or being pushy to be on the podcast. Because whenever I have gotten a few people who ask to guest host, and frankly, sometimes that's the way it comes off. And when it does come off like that, I'm like, I don't know if this person's going to be able to
Mm.
handle a rejection without taking it personally. So that was something that I appreciated
Yeah.
about your email. And then how would you describe like what happened after I emailed? Like I guess I'm just curious. Like when I emailed you back and I was like, tell me more about yourself, like what was that like?
Well, I'm a very like anxious person, and I'm a former gifted kid, so I was like, I have to prove myself.
Preaching to the choir. I feel so
Literally.
attacked right now.
I have to prove
Oh my
myself.
god.
Oh my god.
And I was just I was like, oh god, some of these aren't very hot takes. Some of these are just kind of general agreed like ideas, and I was like, oh lord, these are gonna suck. Like I'm very self-deprecating on myself, like when it comes to like my thoughts and ideas when I'm submitting them to another person, and I was just like, oh god, these are meh. I doubt like they'll really latch on, even though I really wish they would, you know?
Yeah, so for context, I think I had reached out because you had mentioned that you had a lot of, I guess, like thoughts or ideas about what you think could be discussed on the podcast. And I asked you to send me a longer list. You had kind of described it in like maybe a sentence or two, but I was like, no, I want a list. I was like, bullet point out like what you think should be discussed on the podcast. And I thought they were great points. I don't think that everything has to be a hot take in order for it to be a good point. I think personally, like, the way that you may have been viewing and interacting with the fandom is different from the way that I have been, in the sense that like I haven't been super active historically on my own personal time on like Tumblr, for example, or Instagram. Primarily, like I would just jump in, I would like read a Reddit post, I would comment a little bit, and then I would go. And then I think also like from Lucas's perspective, he's not jumping onto like social media and interacting. Like I think primarily Lucas, correct me if I'm wrong, but like this podcast is how you have a discussion about the content, right?
Right, it's just this podcast.
Yeah. And so I thought, Cath, that you had a potentially like different and interesting perspective if you're coming at it from like the Tumblr world, because I think the way that the fandom expresses itself on Tumblr is different from Twitter, and it's different from IG, and it's different from Reddit. So I thought that you could also have some interesting takes from that as well. So when I asked you to expand on those ideas, you sent me like a bulleted point list, which I also like because I'm like a bullet bitch is how I describe myself. Like I love organizing everything into bullets. So I was like, this is perfect. I was like, this is ideal. This is how I can understand and translate this information. So no, I don't think that any of your ideas sounded stupid. And I don't think that something has to be like hot takes or anything in order to be on the podcast. We talk about not hot take shit like all of the time.
Yeah, truly, yeah.
We say some of the most like agreeable shit on the podcast. So it's like, trust me, it's not an issue. And then afterwards, we had scheduled a little like what I would call like a personality fit call, right? I didn't come out and tell you it was a personality fit, but that's essentially what we were doing
Hmm.
is we had invited you onto the platform that we record on so we could just chat for a little bit and just see how the vibes were, how it went. And how would you describe that?
Well, I mean, kind of entering into any friend duo group is a little bit intimidating, especially since the two of you have very good, like, platonic chemistry. And I was just like, okay, I'm not going to be as funny as them, but I don't know. Maybe I can be charming.
Oh, that's so cute. That's
It's so, I love
adorable.
when
I
people
love how
call me
that's
funny.
phrased. I love that thought process.
Like when I'm listening to the podcast on walks, I mentioned this. Like, y'all will make me laugh, and I'll just look like I've got some issues.
That is so sweet. I don't know. It's, again, this is one of those things, like, I'm very awkward at accepting these type of compliments because, one, it's hard for me to believe that people are actually listening. And two, it's just like, I don't know. It's just the way that Lucas and I talk to each other. So the fact that, like, other people think that it's funny, it's like, I mean, these podcasts are really like, you're just recording conversations and, like, publishing it for the world to hear. It's like if Lucas and I were on speakerphone in front of a microphone. That's like what these podcasts
Right.
are.
Yeah, truly.
I think those are the best kinds of podcasts, to be honest.
I love that. I'm glad that it feels that way.
I also listened to the Jenna Julian podcast. Like, I know it's
Oh my
dead, but yeah, I love
god.
like when people who have chemistry talk to each other, you know?
I love the Jenna Julian podcast. I'm so sad that I, like, discovered it post Jenna leaving, but oh, so great. Sometimes I listen to some of their episodes, like, help me go to sleep because I'm a person who, like, needs a little bit of noise and distraction to prevent my brain from going crazy when I'm, like, laying in my bed. I listen to they have this episode where Jenna has Julian guess the video game soundtracks and what video games they belong to, and that's the one I listen to, like, every night to go to bed. I love that podcast. I wish I had discovered it while it was being published. So yeah, thank you for describing what that was like. And now you're here, which is great. I love that you're here. I think genuinely Lucas and I have had a great time chatting with you, and I
Yeah.
think it's going to make for a really interesting episode. And, if things go well and if you enjoy the experience, I don't see any reason why we can't have you on future episodes as well. But I don't want you to feel like I'm putting you on the spot or anything. We can go through this one, and if you're like, this is terrible and I never want to have a conversation with the two of them ever again, then you can just
Oh
ghost
god,
us.
it would
It's
be an
fine.
honor if I was on again.
But yeah, no, I think it's, like, helpful for other people to hear, right? Because there have been other people who have reached out to me and is like, I want to be a guest host, and, like, I don't want to say it's an interview, but it is kind of an interview, right? Like, we're going to chat a little bit. I'm going to get the person on the phone, make sure the vibes are correct, make sure that it's not going to be an hour-long conversation. It's going to be uncomfortable for, like, everyone to listen to and participate in. And, fortunately, we got very lucky on our first attempt at it. It's a good fit. So thanks for joining us and allowing us to interview you for a very, very serious position.
I'm so happy to be here, though.
Yay! Okay, before we get on with the rest of the chapter, let me interrupt with some plugs. So you can leave us a voice message at anchor.fm/play-choices-podcast/message. It could show up in a future episode. You can also directly support this podcast at anchor.fm/play-choices-podcast/support. If we haven't convinced you yet, listen to this amazing, amazing commercial that Lucas and I put together for you. It takes me hours. It takes me, no, keep singing. It takes me hours to record. No, keep doing it. It takes me hours to record and edit this podcast. And with your donation of $1 a month could save me from smashing her fucking head into a wall. Thank you so much. And back to our episode. So yeah, thank you, Cath, for sharing your experiences, and I think it's good for other people to hear that so they better understand, what the process could be like if they do want to reach out and kind of guest host. I think we're ready to head into the discussion portion of the podcast. And I know, Cath, a couple weeks ago, you sent me some great thought starters and just your thoughts about the fandom in general that I thought were really interesting. So, Cath, I'm going to hand the mic off to you to present to us what your thoughts are, what you have crafted.
Okay, so I have a little warm-up thought because warm-ups are good if public school taught me anything, but so Pixelberry knows we use acronyms to refer to books, and I think it's beautiful that they gave us one called Save the Date, so it abbreviates to STD.
No, that sorry, I didn't expect that to be the opening thought. Yeah, Lucas, there is this like wedding planner book called Save the Date, and it's like, I think, because again, I'm primarily go on Reddit for like discussion threads, and I think like one of the first things that people brought up was like, really, this acronym is like super unfortunate.
They had to know, in my opinion. They had to.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like in every single one of these books, like all of the characters fuck so much that it could be like an accurate title for like any of them. Especially like the one thing I think I was seeing someone on Instagram was like posting edits about Across the Void, if you remember that book. That was a book where the MC fucked, y'all. Like every character was a love interest. Every character was a fucking love interest. And that's just where my brain took me after I heard STD.
I recently diamond mined Across the Void, and I was just like, okay, we're like over halfway through the book, and love interests are still being introduced.
Yes. Oh my god. There would be this enemy, and like you would defeat them, and you'd be like, y'all want to fuck now? And I was like, oh my god. I was like, no one has enough diamonds for this. Like, nobody.
Like, honestly, actually, I do have like some stuff about like Across the Void, because I think it's a really interesting case study into like fandom and Pixelberry interactions and how that impacts the content that we like get.
Oh my god, go into it. Go off, queen.
Okay.
Yes, queen.
So, do y'all like, okay, V, you remember when they were marketing Across the Void to us, right?
I probably was paying more attention to the app at that point, but feel free to remind me and refresh my memory.
Okay, so it was like, it looked amazing. It was like this sci-fi thing, and I love sci-fi. I grew up watching Star Trek as a kid, so it looked really interesting. And okay, so there was this kind of Tumblr specific thing that people were saying, especially when we were like seeing the love interests and stuff. And so this book was being hyped up to just like Mount Everest levels. So that's what I was seeing. And the basic things that people were saying, oh, this is for the women who love women, and then Big Sky Country was for the men who love men. Across the Void was also being said. It was like that was the culture at the time that like was hyping up the book. That was how it was being hyped up. Another thing people would say was, oh, Across the Void is for the bottoms. I remember that so vividly.
Oh my god. I do remember there being a shit ton of hype. I don't think the Reddit community is as flavorful as the Tumblr community can be at times. I think Reddit can tend to be like a little bit more straightforward, but yeah, I do remember Across the Void was like grossly overhyped. And it's not that it's a bad book, at least in the beginning it wasn't, but it's just more so that because it was really, I mean, I can't think of another book that was like so sci-fi heavy. There have been like Perfect Match, maybe one of them that's a little bit sci-fi, but not really. And this one just took it like a definite step further. They had such a large diversity in terms of the ally selection, and I definitely think it had such great potential. And I'll leave it at that.
We discovered it was rules of engagement in space. That was not my wording. That was somebody on Tumblr. I don't remember who. I just have these like imprints of the whole debacle.
Across the Void, I remember they went on hiatus.
Yeah, I like came back worse.
It came back so much worse. And it's crazy because didn't it go like on hiatus around like chapter like 13 or 14 or something? It went on hiatus like pretty close to the end, I think. In order to like rewrite the entire plot they were going towards, what they did is I think this was one of the first books, at least that I witnessed, because normally Choices tries to stick to like the 16 chapter limit. They're going to wrap it all up with a nice bow after 16 chapters. And Across the Void, because they had to rewrite it and like reestablish plot points in order to make the ending make sense, it went on to like chapter 22 or something, right?
Yeah, it got like it was compressed. It was so just compressed when it came back.
It just makes me so sad. Like Across the Void in the beginning, like I really love the premise. Lucas, so you know, Across the Void, like the premise is that your MC is like the captain of like a spaceship during a civil war that's happening between two groups in space. Which sounds so interesting. It's not. Like
Yo.
it's just disappointment.
We've generally diagnosed the problems with Across the Void.
Oh, please.
So it like there wasn't enough like real world building. We didn't really understand the alien species or like what the Civil War was about.
My God. There were so many times where they were like, you can help this side or this side. And I was sitting at the screen like, I don't give a fuck. Y'all have not made me invested into either one of them. Both of them seem like assholes because the captain, your MC, is just trying to get to this one planet and we can't get to the fucking planet because of the Civil War. And I'm like, can't we just go the long way around? Can we just turn right and just go around? Like, why? Why do we have to sail straight through this fucking war? Oh my god, it was so irritating. And then, didn't the one time that they did offer you the opportunity to like pick sides, it like did nothing? I think there was one choice.
Was that at the end, or was it like the times it was like in the middle of the book you could support this side or that side?
I almost want to say, and granted, I am recalling this from like pure memory. I actually think that the first episode I recorded prior to bringing Lucas on board, we talked about Across the Void, and that was in 2019. So I am pulling back from like almost 2 years ago. So forgive me if I have any details wrong. But I want to say it was like one of the sides of the Civil War attacked your ship, and then you captured him. And they were basically like, we can either let him go back to his group or we can kill him. And I was like, man, this is going to have serious implications to the rest of the book. Spoiler alert, it did fucking nothing. It did nothing. It did nothing.
Yeah, like they were like, oh, stay neutral and shit. And I was like, nobody enjoyed Across the Void. That book was not well done. I feel like the fact that it wasn't well done, it was a really amazing setup. The fandom actually kind of killed that book.
Oh, please explain your thoughts. I would love to hear more.
Spill the tea, sis. Spill the tea.
The book was so overhyped that, like, it could never have lived up to that hype. And the fact that it was just kind of poorly executed in general was, like, that killed the book. Like, nobody was spending diamonds on it. They were just like, fuck is this?
I 100% agree with you. First of all, I think anything that's overhyped, no matter how good it is always going to fall short of expectations. That's why they call it being overhyped. I've seen this happen to like various types of media, whether it's like music, video games, movies, TV shows. It always fucking happens, and it definitely happened in Choices. I don't really know like why I wish I understood why they rewrote the book, because it was very obvious. I'm sure at some point Lucas will play it. When you're playing it, it becomes very obvious at what point it gets rewritten, because it's just the plot just does like a 180, and you're like, this is not what I fucking thought this is going to be about. It's incredibly misleading.
Honestly, like, I've been thinking about, like, hiatuses, and, like, I think hiatuses are a bad sign for a book.
Always. Always. A book has never gone on hiatus for a positive reason. They're never like, this book is going so well, we're going to put it on pause. Because across the board, they rewrote the whole damn thing. My first two loves, they went on hiatus because they realized that they put the one female ally in the complete back burner, and then in order to make up for that, you had nothing but interactions with her for like the next 10 chapters. Open Heart went on hiatus because they were going to kill Raphael, and then they realized that was a bad idea. So then they rewrote it. I'm trying to think of other books that went on hiatus, but those are the three that I can think of.
Baby Bump 2 is on hiatus right now.
You're absolutely correct. I'm not a Babu fan. That's as it's called by the fandom, Babu.
I'm not a fan either.
I'm gonna have to get into it. I'm sure we're gonna read it at some point. There are people who are fans of it, but I'm not a Babu fan, so.
I'm not a fan. I barely know what's going on in that book. I just tap through it so quickly, like.
Just diamond mining the fuck out of it. Yeah, no, I understand. I thought the first one was so boring I couldn't even diamond mine it. Like, you ever just get bored? Like, there's too much content in the chapters. You just try to get through it to diamond mine. Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, hiatuses are like the kiss of death on a book, I honestly think. Like, if a book goes through hiatus and people still enjoy it, that's a miracle.
I wonder if Wolf Bride's gonna go on hiatus.
You know what? I think they're going full chugga chugga choo choo on that book, and I wish they wouldn't. I know very little things about that book, and everything that I've learned, I wish I could unlearn.
I've actually played, like, most of it until, like, the last chapter, honestly.
Is it finished releasing, or is it still releasing?
No, it's still releasing. It's just that my VIP expired because I was like, okay, I'm done with VIP.
Gotcha.
I gave it chances. I kept giving it chances. What I will say is that it's based on a genre of books that we as readers were not primed for in the choices ranks of their books.
Okay, so feel free to like explain to us because I haven't played it, Lucas hasn't played it. I know Lucas was interested. He said that it seemed somewhat interesting to him during like the first episode when we were recording. So feel free to give us some plot details in order to, I guess, kind of describe why you don't think the fandom was prepared for that.
So it's a werewolf book, and I don't know, like, I guess they were kind of going off like, oh, people were interested in the werewolves from Nightbound, but they focused on like the main character, the default name is Celine, coming into the town and like coming across these two people, a man and a woman, and both are customizable. So you know there's the love interests.
Right.
And they clearly have some beef between them. Oh my god, I wonder why. You meet up with your weird uncle, and then he's like, oh, you should go out, or something. And then you go out, and then you like meet somebody, and then you get kidnapped, and it turns out you're supposed to be a bride to a wolf, a werewolf.
Oh my god.
Wow, so you do literally get kidnapped.
Oh, you get kidnapped like multiple times.
Oh my god, it's a trend.
They made it a theme! Oh no!
That is definitely going to be in the genre section. It's just
Kidnapped.
Kidnapping.
Genre. Gonna be like marriage, kidnapping, Stockholm Syndrome. Oh my god.
So basically the whole thing is like the werewolves trying to convince you that, oh, you belong there. You should like totally go along with your relationship to the werewolf who you got like force married to. And it's just like, well, prove to me that you're the kind of guy I want to be with. And then the female love interest is kind of like against them, and it's like, oh, you don't know the full story about them. It's like, okay, I mean, I can romance you of my own choice, so I'm gonna go with that. With the guy who decided that I was gonna marry him, maybe we're just gonna keep like an arm's length away.
I wish that I understood what the brainstorming meetings at Pixelberry were for these books, because it seems to me that like over the past year or so they have just taken like a lot of liberties with like different genres and different types of character relationships that to me kind of resemble more so other interactive stories, novels, apps. And I can understand why they're trying to experiment, because they're like, well, these other types of apps and content are gaining traction with people who enjoy spending money on this kind of stuff, right? So it's like, maybe we need to introduce, but not everything that is out there needs to be replicated.
I was thinking about how the books have really changed over time. And if you look from like Rules of Engagement, The Royal Romance, to like fall 2018, where they had like A Courtesan of Rome, It Lives Beneath, Bloodbound, and then now we have fucking Baby Bump, Foreign Affairs, The Nanny Affair, Wolf Bride. But it seems to have gone from campy to like plot driven and really well developed to like these very romance driven like books.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think I kind of wonder if Choices failed to grow with its user base, or like stay with the kind of user base it tried to cultivate, you know?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Like in the beginning, some of the earlier books were like The Royal Romance, Rules of Engagement, as you said, Love Hacks is another one. I think Perfect Match and Endless Summer were also like one of their first couple of books. It was almost like it was like mostly love with a twist kind of thing is how I would describe the majority of those books. And then there were a couple where you could tell they were experimenting with like something that was a little bit maybe more plot heavy rather than like character relationship driven. 2018 to 2019 to me was just like the golden era of Choices. Like it was just like,
yeah,
I just love
I
the books that
wholeheartedly
were
agree.
made. Like on Fridays where they had like Ride or Die and Open Heart and The Elementalist, I was like, fuck yes, it's Friday. Like every Friday, I was like immediately, y'all, I would be at work. I would literally be at work in my little like desk, and I would be like, let me just quickly tap through the story and play it. Like, oh my god, I just love the stories that were coming out, and now I think it's difficult because it's like every book that they put out feels like an experiment at this point. It doesn't feel like a choices book. Like we think about Witness. Witness is one of those books where the play style was very different, because it was like you can spend $5 to not be a fucking bitch, or you can choose the free option, which is to break a plate because you're upset about something. And that is something that is very frequent. Like if you go and experiment with other apps, a lot of them have that play style of like every positive interaction requires money. And then if you don't have a positive interaction, then you just overreact to everything. And it is like, it's very frustrating to watch Choices like grapple with these new formats, because clearly they're experimenting. Like clearly they're trying to see if their user base is prepared for something like that, right?
Yeah.
And trying to test and learn, which I can always get behind, but it's almost like it's like sometimes I feel like with new books it's just such a toss up. Like I'm like, is this going to be classic choices that I really enjoy, or is this going to be some bullshit new format that I'm going to have to suffer through for a dime in mind?
I mean, I kind of feel like Choices has decided to change, and it's kind of, so the way I view it is that the creators cultivate the kind of fandom they have. And so the fandom was kind of, cultivated in a certain way, and now Choices has started to change, and it's straight away to that from that, and it's like now people don't really know how to react because we're kind of expecting this, that, and the other.
Yeah, I guess something that I see debated online very frequently is whether or not Choices is responsible for the fandom that they have, or if the fandom is the one driving the content. I see that debate like all of the time on social media, and normally it's from frustrated fans who are asserting that the only reason why Choices has people who would want to pay for a book like Witness, or who would want to pay for a book like Wolf Bride, is because they are primarily advertising that type of stuff, right? So when they talk about like Most Wanted that got canceled, that's not really a romance book. That was like a detective mystery book. And if you look at their ads, which like I wouldn't recommend, if you haven't seen those ads, I wouldn't recommend you go fucking looking for them because they are horrific. But if you go look at their ads, they're not advertising these style of books. They're advertising like this is an example. I'm completely pulling this out of my ass. No, actually, no. I'll tell you about an advertisement I just saw recently. It just popped up. It's using the foreign affairs characters, okay? So, Lucas, you'll be familiar with this because we've gotten further enough into the book that you can understand the ad. All right, before we move on to the rest of the chapter, let me interrupt to plug our socials. We are at Play Choices Podcast on Instagram and at Play Choices Pod on Twitter. You can also go to playchoicespodcast.tumblr.com for our Tumblr page, which is where I post any episode notes that I have, like links to posts I've mentioned, photos I've mentioned, or more. We're also available for listening on all major platforms, so if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please rate, review, and subscribe. It's a funky thing with the algorithm that helps us a lot. I wish I could explain it more in depth, but I just know that it helps us, so we do appreciate any reviews that you leave us. And as always, we are a growing podcast, so if you see us pop up on your socials, we do appreciate a share, a retweet, or a reblog, depending on the platform you see us on. We also appreciate it when you share our podcast with your fellow choices-loving friends. And now back to the episode. The ad is quite literally, Blaine walks up to Kennedy and is like, "Can I go on a date with you?" And you can either be like, "I'm busy," or like give them your phone number or something like that. It's some sort of like accept or reject option. And then the ad will show you picking accept. Then Kennedy will walk into the library, and then like what I'm assuming is like a couple of like the characters who are friends with Kennedy in the book will like just rush her and be like, "I can't believe you said yes to going on a date with him. You know it's gonna ruin your reputation. He's supposed to be your mortal enemy." And it's this is literally all in the ad. And then Blaine will like walk up from behind Kennedy and will be like, "Are you guys talking about me?" And he has like a sad face on. And then you either have the option to like confront him or reject him. And then it'll show the screen of like choices, stories you play, download the app. And I was like, what the fuck is this shit? Like,
Foreign Affairs was like, oh god, that book was supposed to save the fandom.
was it? Were people looking at it like that?
Yes, they were. They were like, oh my god, finally some good fucking food.
Some good fucking food.
Thank you, Gordon Ramsay, for the words you gave me.
Oh my god.
Oh god. That is so depressing. I didn't know that like people were I mean, here's the thing, like I think foreign affairs, like I think it's split into two camps. I think there's people who relied a lot on it to like do good things and therefore are now disappointed and therefore like disgusted by the premise. But I also think there are people who are like, I like it, not the best book, not the worst book. I haven't really seen anybody who was like in love with it yet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the camp of it's not the best book, but you know, it's enjoyable. It's not Baby Bump.
Oh my
The
god.
baby bump slander on this podcast.
Oh, I know.
Listen, I hate kids. I hate kids. Pregnancy sounds terrifying. I can't. Oh my god.
I'm so glad we're all on the same page about this because as someone who also doesn't ever want to have children, and it's not because I'm unhealthy or because I can't afford it or because I won't be in a good relationship. It's just like I don't care how good my life is. I don't want to add a child to that. So playing a book where like the MC is like super into like motherhood and like we're gonna have they already had the baby in Babu too, but the thought of playing a book like that like makes my skin crawl. Like
You will love the last episode we did. If you have you'll love it.
oh my god, no, let me tell you something about I don't know what it is. I know that I think I can't remember if we said this during the recording or beforehand, but we were kind of joking about recording an episode drunk or high, and I kind of threw back to I think it was episode 3 for us where I think Lucas was high. And I thought at the time of recording that podcast that was going to be the craziest we could get is like one of us being not sober, inebriated, off of something. And as we have continued recording episodes, they just continued to get more and more rambunctious.
Mhm.
Like, some
Yeah,
of the
truly.
things that are said during the nanny affair episode are like, I was like, wow, we're really going there. Like, this podcast is going to end up being so like niche in its sense of humor and the topics that we discuss.
It's so crazy because I like obviously like do we hide our true identities? Yes. But the amount of information you can get from listening to a conversation between me and V is more important on who we are than a name will ever give you.
Absolutely correct.
There's so many times that I will re-listen to a podcast and I'm like, this is truly how we fucking talk every single day of our life. For the past like going on like 13, 14 years. Like
Yeah. No, absolutely. There will be sometimes where just like, oh my God, I'll be editing and I'll be like, should I cut out the name of our hometown? I'm gonna do that. Like, I'll just like cut out like little tidbits of information that we bring up because I'm like, oh, the podcast can still flow without that. But I'm like, man, we are really talking like uncensored on here.
Actually, I do have a question for y'all.
Oh
Okay.
my,
uh-oh.
yay!
Uh-oh.
Oh,
Oh,
two very different reactions. I was like very excited. Lucas is afraid. Okay.
okay. So we all know how y'all are when you're like talking through like the chapters of the book. And I was
Mhm.
wondering, are you really that observant and nitpicky when playing, or do you play it up for entertainment value?
Ooh.
Ooh.
I'm not trying to call y'all out, but I have a hypothesis, and I would like to hear your answer before I give you that hypothesis.
Okay, I have two responses.
Okay, go ahead, Lucas. Give me more time.
The entertainment value comes with the plot of the book. So there are books like Ride or Die and maybe even Foreign Affairs where I allow myself to enjoy it for the entertainment purposes as opposed to like nitpicking it. But me and V growing up in like college classes, AP classes, honors classes, stuff like that, we were literally made to annotate books, which is just essentially breaking down it like literary devices and just like authors and just like truly like tear and rip apart a book. So like it kind of is second nature to us to be a little nitpicky. It's hard to silence that part of your brain when you've done it in school for like 6 years.
Yeah, and so for me, it's absolutely what Lucas said. I, in high school, like, they would give us a book and they would be like, they would measure you by the amount of sticky notes that you put in the book.
That's so stupid.
It's so dumb, but like, this is absolutely what I did in my English classes. Every single English course from like ninth to 12th grade, this is what it was like, right? So you would have to annotate like, oh, the theme of this is present in here, and this is a motif, and this is a symbol. And so it's just kind of like the way that I feel like I've been trained to analyze stuff because that's how I literally used to be graded in high school. And I think the answer is different depending on the book, right? Like, I think, let me think of one that I just purely enjoy. Love Hacks, not a book I would ever play and be like, let me think about these characters. But I think for books that I enjoy a lot, like Write or Die, and I don't want to give Lucas any spoilers about that, but I think that there's a lot of things that are given to you in the upfront of the book that kind of hint at what's going to happen. And I think from a replaying value on my own, it does make me want to go back and investigate on all of those things. So it's not that it's every single book that I do that. There are some books I just play just to enjoy the plot line. So absolutely, there are definitely times where I'm like, if I had just been playing it as me, myself, and I, just to enjoy something, I maybe would have never thought about some of the notes that I have written down for the episode. But because I am writing it down, it does kind of like force me to think a little bit more critically. And I can't tell you how many times I have been like looking at the notes and reading them like during the podcast, during the recording, and I've been like, oh, that dialogue choice is a little weird. I didn't think about it until I said it out loud. But that dialogue choice is kind of weird, right? And then we just get off on a tangent. It's a little bit of both. The answer is a little bit of both.
Okay, because I have this theory that because a lot of the times the writing of books is so, like, kind of over the top and, like, subtlety, don't know her, it kind of, it encourages the fandom to be very dramatic and, you know, nitpicky, and, like, after a chapter comes out, there's, like, screenshots of, like, a piece of dialogue and, like, just a person making fun of it in some ways. The writing's generally pretty straightforward, like, because you can't make it, like, so that people who are younger or, you know, not super invested in analyzing it can't, like, enjoy it in that way.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like they have to be able to appeal to the kind of audience that thinks the song Driver's License is the saddest song ever. So
oh my god, the drag.
Oh
The
my
absolute fucking drag.
listen, I have to hear that song at work like 3 times in a 4-hour shift, and she's like, you said forever, now I drive alone past your street. It's like, he was 17 when he said that. No 17-year-old really means it when they say forever, sweetheart. Pick yourself off the floor.
Pick yourself off the floor.
Like, girl, don't drive past this street. Go someplace else. Do some stuff for yourself. Like,
I know, it's like, go get yourself a McFlurry, girl. It's gonna be fine. Especially because the man she's talking about in that song is so dusty, but we don't have to get off on that tangent.
No, truly, like, dusty.
But yeah, like, if we think about it on, like, the level of the books kind of have to appeal to the kind of audience that would think, oh my god, this song is so sad. Like, it kind of, the writing kind of makes sense, you know?
Yeah. I also think sometimes, like, you know, Lucas and I have played through the first chapter of Open Heart Book 1, and sometimes I feel like they do it just to kind of, like you said, hype up drama, hype up character development. These are not things anyone would say in real life. I hope not. But even with Open Heart, like, there was that whole diamond option, Lucas, where you had to essentially pick whether to go talk to Ethan or hide. And it felt like the hiding was an overreaction to encourage players to pick diamond options. So they're like, oh, if they realize how terrible the free option is, then maybe next time, instead of embarrassing their character, they'll pay for the reasonable one.
Not gonna lie, if somebody with a humiliation fetish played choices, and they wouldn't have to spend any diamonds, they just have a great time.
Oh, absolutely. Every chapter would be like an absolutely wild ride for them.
I don't want to say choices is broken. I'm just gonna say it's kind of changed over time, and the direction isn't what I think the fans would have asked for. And that's a little bit disappointing because we're the ones who who hype it up, we recommend it to our friends, who and the thing is, usually it's going, like, if you think about within, like, queer circles, especially with queer women, we recommend things to each other. Like, if a TV show has a character come out as a queer woman, suddenly it's going to have, like, a bunch of queer women watching it. Like,
yeah.
And the fact that Choices is kind of not as, like, it has previously been pretty good about diversity and having characters that stand up on our own. Now we have the customizable love interests, and like I've said before, and I'll say it again, I have mixed feelings on those. And it kind of feels like they want to have their cake and eat it. They want to have this amazing fan base that is, like, really diverse and encourages them to be better, but they also want money. They also want the easy money.
Absolutely. I think what happens, from my perspective, I'm not a person where I'm like, every book has to appeal to me, every book has to be my favorite, you know? Like, I don't like Babu, but I'm also not gonna comment on Choices post or tweets or whatever other thing and request that they cancel it, right? Because there are people who enjoy that style of book. It's not my thing, and I'm also not going to force anyone to not enjoy it. But I think what people are asking for is like, oh my God, give us a chance to like feel like this book relates to me, right? Like if you're a queer person, you want to feel like the MC is a person you can identify with. You want to feel like there's allies that you can identify with. You're a person of color, you want to see that there's MCs that look like you. You want to see if there's allies that look like you, or maybe the people that you tend to be attracted to, right? I don't think that a lot of those things have to happen in every book. I do personally, just as a side note, I just kind of brought up like sexuality and race as like a example. I do think that every book should be accessible for every sexuality and every race, personally. When it comes to genres and things like that, like maybe for someone a romance heavy book isn't going to be the thing for them. Maybe they want mystery, they want sci-fi, whatever it is, right? And for me, I don't need every book to be like a ride or die. But I would like it every now and then. It would keep me coming back to the app more often. And I think with scenarios like that, sometimes it feels like they go through, like you said, like we talked about earlier, they go through phases where it's like, this is the bite of life phase, and then this is the really plot heavy phase, and now this is the really trashy, like erotica novel phase. And it's like,
You didn't lie. You didn't lie.
That's what it feels like, and I don't mind if you want to put a trashy erotica novel on the app, that's fine. But like, God, don't make me go through 9 months of it without something else to hold on as a life raft, you know?
Yeah.
I think if they just were better able to diversify their books on a timely manner, so rather than being like, we're going to go through a year we do this, and a year we do this, and a year we do this, I think they would be more successful at appeasing the fans if they were like, all right, well, maybe this year we'll release one book like this, and another book like this, and another book like this. But oftentimes it feels like they just kind of gather their writers and they're like, this is the only thing we want in 2021. Go write it. And I think that that leads to a lot of people feeling left out. And this is why people uninstall the apps. This is why people don't buy VIP or just don't renew, because of the fact that they go through these really concrete phases of these are the only type of books that we're making. And if you do that for a year and it takes another year to get back to the type of content that a certain subsection of fans are willing to pay for, you're going to lose that subsection of fans. And then because the data is telling you, oh, well, we did, 2018 was great. We're going to skip that type of book in 2020. We're going to come back to it in 2021. Well, those fans who appreciated 2018 content, they're gone. They're not here anymore. So now all of their data is like, oh, these books are failing. And it's like because you completely isolated that part of your audience for a year. So they're gone. And I think it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way.
I think it's just like the fandom that was created by like the golden age is just, we're bored right now.
That's truly.
Before we continue with the rest of the episode, I do want to remind everyone that if you have any questions, theories, or comments that you would like to be included in a future episode, please email us at playchoicespodcast@gmail.com. Make sure to specify whether you want to be shouted out or not, otherwise all emails will be anonymous. Questions can be related to books we've recorded episodes on, books that we haven't discussed yet, or even questions that you'd like to ask us. Alternatively, you can go to our Ask box on playchoicespodcast.tumblr.com and submit a question. Just specify that it's for the podcast and we'll be sure to include it. And back to our episode. Hey everyone, this is V. Post-editing, post-production V. Just wanted to interrupt and let you know that this is yet again another episode that ran a bit long, and the conversation was great. It was fantastic. Cath was an amazing guest. I am so happy that she extended us the honor of her time. We love talking to her. Hopefully we'll be able to arrange a time to talk to Cath again. But this is just your notification that we are ending the episode here. There will be a part 2. I don't think that we're going to post it next week immediately. We'll probably separate this into another episode that will be posted sometime after. I don't know when. I haven't decided yet. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the new format. It is truly something that Lucas and I were so excited for. And I think there's a lot that we can do with this new format. I think it is something that we're looking into exploring with and experimenting more. So thank you so much for listening. Tune in next week. We're going to be talking about Bloodbound Book 1, Chapter 1. It's a very popular one that people have requested a lot. We'll be posting the part 2 of this discussion later on, so keep on the lookout for that. The best way to stay up to date on when we're posting the episode will be on our socials. We'll announce a schedule there. So thank you so much for listening again, and hope to see you next week.